Tough conversations are one of the most important skills that leaders have to master. And getting on top of a tough conversation requires three things. Firstly, you have to know what they are. Secondly, you have to know once you're in one how to engage effectively in it. And lastly, you have to create a culture in your organization where you can encourage tough conversations to happen. And doing that can really transform the trust and performance of an organization. So tough conversations are ones that are intense. They're ones that feel difficult, and often they're dealing with topics that are hard to talk about, issues around identity or issues around respect. But they're ones that come up frequently, so you can't really ignore them because they affect you or they might affect someone else, and you really have to engage in them. In addition, often with a tough conversation, you're going to find that your story, your narrative about what's going on is quite different to your counterparts. And so you have to be ready to tease that out, and you have to be ready to understand the facts and the feelings that they're bringing to this dynamic as well. And that brings us to the second point, which is how do you engage in these conversations? If you're the one initiating a tough conversation, you really then have a responsibility for keeping it safe and keeping it as light as you can, so your counterpart has the courage and confidence to share information that you need to hear, but also that you're showing up in a constructive way. You're not closing the conversation down. And there are a couple of techniques you can use to keep that safe space. The most important one is being vulnerable, actually saying what's going on for you, but also getting your counterpart to share things that maybe they themselves haven't thought much about. So asking good questions. Another technique that's very good is contrasting. So saying, look, on this particular issue, we've got something to work through, we can improve. But in general, I really appreciate you as a colleague, as a boss, as a report. You have to create that sense of constructive discussion. I'm here to help us, and I really respect you, and I like working with you. You personally are not a threat here, but we have a behavioral challenge between us to address. You have to create that space. And then, of course, you have to follow up with actions that arise from the conversation. And the last step is then, how do you do this at organizational level? You can just do it yourself, which I think is always good practice. But if you sense that avoidance is a problem in your organization, then you really want to create a safe space for conversation. Having training like the content we've covered here, I think is really important. But even more important is getting agreement that this is important in your leadership team or in your report team. How do you make sure that people recognize this is something that you need to do? And if you want to take this forward, TESS is an organization that does this. So yeah, reach out if you want any other input. Cheers.